Trump, Bolton say U.S. withdrawal from Syria is conditional on defeat of ISIS January 6, 2019. With the White House facing criticism over President Trump's decision to withdraw U.S. forces from Syria, National Security Advisor John Bolton on Sunday said the drawdown will be conditioned on the defeat of the Islamic State and the safety of Kurdish allies. There are objectives that we want to accomplish that condition the withdrawal, Bolton told reporters in Jerusalem, where he was traveling to assuage concerns over the troop pullback. The timetable flows from the policy decisions that we need to implement. Bolton is expected to tell Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that troops will remain at a base in Syria to counter Iranian activity, according to a senior U.S. administration official who spoke with NPR's Daniel Estrin. Speaking from the White House, President Trump also said on Sunday that the withdrawal would be contingent on the defeat of remaining Islamic State forces. "We won't be finally pulled out until ISIS is gone," Trump said before departing for Camp David. The remarks represent a departure from the president's earlier statements about the timeline for U.S. involvement in Syria. "Our boys, our young women, our men, they're all coming back, and they're coming back now," Trump said in a video declaring victory over ISIS on December 19, as reports began to surface that he would withdraw troops from both Syria and Afghanistan. That announcement was met with criticism from members of both parties, and was followed by two high-profile resignations, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis and Brett McGurk, the U.S. envoy to the coalition fighting the Islamic State. Mattis turned in his letter of resignation the following day, citing the president's right to have a Secretary of Defense whose views are better aligned with yours. McGurk announced his resignation several days later. "The recent decision by the president came as a shock and was a complete reversal of policy that was articulated to us," McGurk wrote in an email to colleagues obtained by the New York Times. "It left our coalition partners confused and our fighting partners bewildered." Bolton said that the U.S. would continue negotiations with Turkish officials to secure protection for Kurdish allies in the northeastern part of Syria. Syrian Kurds, who have fought ISIS alongside American forces, fear an attack from Turkey when the U.S. withdraws. While the U.S. has relied on Kurdish forces, known as the YPG, in the fight against ISIS, Turkey considers the group an offshoot of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK. That group has been classified as a terrorist organization by both the U.S. and Turkey. After Trump announced his withdrawal plan, Turkey began to deploy military vehicles and troops close to a northwest Syrian town that it has long sought to capture, Bloomberg reports. Bolton has urged Kurdish allies not to seek protection from Russia or Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government. "I think they know who their friends are," he said. Fighting alongside Arab and Kurdish forces, American troops have been largely successful in pushing back the Islamic State and stabilizing the country, since entering Syria in 2014. But Pentagon officials say about 2% of the group's self-proclaimed caliphate remains in the country. NPR's Greg Meyer reported in December on Trump's policy in Syria. "He has essentially carried on with President Obama's policy in Syria, launched in 2014, when ISIS was at its peak, and defined by an aggressive bombing campaign and a small number of U.S. forces who work with the Kurds and other U.S. partners." The U.S. has an estimated 2,000 troops in Syria, mostly in the northeast. Dismantling ISIS has been an important achievement, and has come at a far lower cost compared to other U.S. military engagements in the region. Critics of the Syria withdrawal, including Senator Lindsey Graham, RS.C., who is normally a close ally of the president, have said a quick withdrawal would be a mistake, in part because it could leave the region vulnerable to a possible ISIS resurgence. The president provided no firm timetable on Sunday for a pullback, simply telling reporters, "It's going quickly." Additional details are expected to be discussed on Monday, when Bolton travels to Turkey for talks with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. How Trump's tweet storms to rally support for the government shutdown seem to be working January 6, 2019. Since first threatening a government shutdown last month in his battle with Congress over border wall funding, President Donald Trump has leaned heavily on Twitter to rally support among his followers. So far, the strategy seems to be working. That, however, doesn't bode well for a quick resolution to the standoff. With a partial government shutdown now in its third week, the White House signaled on Sunday that talks to reopen the federal government could produce a deal that sees Trump moving away from his demand that a proposed barrier along the U.S. border with Mexico be a concrete wall. The possible concession, which comes days after Trump had floated a barrier of steel rather than a concrete wall, came even as a White House official warned that the shutdown could drag on a lot longer. The pledge to build a barrier has made the president a captive of a central campaign promise, which on Saturday the New York Times reported began in 2014 as a memory trick to help Trump remember his hard line on immigration. Speaking to reporters outside the White House on Sunday, Trump repeated his threat that if he is unhappy with negotiations in a few days, he could declare a national emergency and use the military to construct a wall, circumventing Congress. The standoff has left about 800,000 federal employees are furloughed or working without pay. The House, now led by Democrats, passed legislation Thursday night to fund the agencies that have been caught in the border wall crossfire, but could still veto the measure even if the Senate acts to approve it. Trump said on Sunday that he should not have to lower his demand for $5.60 billion in border security funding. As the standoff drags on, Trump has tried to take maximum advantage of the political upheaval to rally support from his followers for his signature 2016 campaign issue. Based on a CNBC review of his wall-related tweets, the effort is paying off. As the December 22 shutdown loomed, Trump linked President Barack Obama's policy toward Iran with the ongoing battle over border security in a tweet. That post generated more than 60,000 retweets, one of the president's biggest wall-related tweets, according to an analysis of his feed by CNBC. He then topped it with a December 30 tweet that generated nearly 250,000 favorites. How do we get him to continue to talk about immigration? The subject of a border wall has been a staple of the president's Twitter feed for the last 3 years. Begun in earnest in the months before he declared his presidential ambitions in June 2015, the pace picked up after his election in November 2016. The number of his followers who support his sentiments with retweets have risen accordingly. While the president's focus on the subject intensified in 2018, the Times reported that talk of the wall began nearly 5 years ago, as Trump's advisors sought ways to help the candidate focus on immigration. How do we get him to continue to talk about immigration? Sam Nunberg, a Trump political advisor, told Roger J. Stone Jr., another advisor, according to the report. "We're going to get him to talk about he's going to build a wall," the Times added. The reference to a wall has prevailed as one of Trump's most popular stump lines among his base. In fact, Trump has been tweeting about building a wall for nearly a decade. Back in May 2009, he first declared that he'd rather build walls than cling to them. Then, in March 2013, the president briefly reversed course on his wall obsession, citing a quote widely attributed to Sir Isaac Newton, "We build too many walls and not enough bridges." Yet during the last 18 months, his stumping for the project has been a reliable traffic generator among his Twitter followers. In June, some 172,000 of his followers liked his tweeted rallying cry, "If you don't have borders, you don't have a country." That placed it among the top 20 of the more than 3,000 tweets sent by the president last year alone. It remains to be seen how much longer the president will continue to mine the border wall issue for political gold among his followers. Trump said Friday he has considered using emergency powers to build a wall along the U.S. Mexico border, a move that would almost certainly draw legal challenges. "Yes, I have," Trump told a reporter who asked if he had weighed using those powers. "I could do it if I wanted." Asked whether he needed congressional approval, Trump said, "No, we could call it national emergency." Trump cites unlikely allies Clinton, Obama amid border wall showdown January 6, 2019. President Trump invoked on Sunday past pro-border security comments by two unlikely political adversaries Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton as the ongoing partial federal government shutdown over border wall funding enters its third week. In a pair of early morning posts on Twitter, Trump, who later headed to a meeting with advisors at Camp David to discuss border security, also seemingly addressed reports that the prolonged shutdown will end up costing the government more than the $5 billion he has requested for the wall, writing that in the end, a properly planned and constructed wall will pay for itself many times a year. Trump's remarks underscored his apparent unwillingness to compromise on securing at least some of the border wall funding he has demanded, despite the insistence of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi that Democrats will never pay for a wall. However, in an interview broadcast Sunday on NBC's Meet the Press, acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney told host Chuck Todd that Trump was willing to agree, and he mentioned this at the Rose Garden press conference, to take a concrete wall off the table. Mulvaney had met with senior congressional officials on Saturday to try to make progress on a compromise, although he suggested the encounter had been mostly unproductive. In Situation Room meeting, Schumer, Pelosi interrupt DHS Secretary within 5 seconds again. What's driving this is the president's desire to change the conditions at the border, Mulvaney said. And if he has to give up a concrete wall, replace it with a steel fence in order to do that so that Democrats can say, see? He's not building a wall anymore that should help us move in the right direction. On Twitter, the president intimated that cynical political considerations were motivating Democrats' rejection of wall funding. Pelosi and other Democrats have suggested they would be willing to fund general border security efforts, but not a wall. The president has told Democrats the shutdown could last more than a year. We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked. Barack Obama, 2005, Trump wrote on Sunday, quoting the former president in 2005. Then Sen. Obama made the remarks at a press conference with then Florida GOP Senator Mel Martinez, as part of a bipartisan effort to address illegal immigration. Obama's full quote at the time, "We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States, undetected, undocumented, unchecked and circumventing the line of people who are waiting patiently, diligently, and lawfully to become immigrants in this country. We all agree on the need to better secure the border and to punish employers who choose to hire illegal immigrants," Obama added. "We are a generous and welcoming people, here in the United States, but those who enter the country illegally, and those who employ them, disrespect the rule of law and they are showing disregard for those who are following the law." Obama went on to advocate for imposing a hefty fine on those already in the country illegally, as well as tighter border security measures. In his post, Trump also provided a partial quote from former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, emphasizing her support for the Secure Fence Act of 2006. That legislation passed by an overwhelming 80-19 majority, and was backed by Obama, as well. "I voted, when I was a senator, to build a barrier to try to prevent illegal immigrants from coming in," Hillary Clinton, 2015, Trump wrote. At a campaign stop in November 2015, Clinton told a crowd, "I voted numerous times when I was a senator to spend money to build a barrier to try to prevent illegal immigrants from coming in. And I do think you have to control your borders." Trump continued, "The only reason they do not want to build a wall is that walls work. 99% of our illegal border crossings will end, crime in our country will go way down and we will save billions of dollars a year. A properly planned and constructed wall will pay for itself many times a year." Last week, former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly flatly asserted in an interview with the Los Angeles Times that the president's proposed border project is not a wall and that all plans for a concrete wall were abandoned long ago, directly contradicting the White House's repeated claims. In a series of Twitter posts last month, Trump insisted that "we are not building a concrete wall, we are building artistically designed steel slats," so that you can easily see through it. But Kelly's comments were seemingly at odds with the president's multiple tweets calling for money to finish the wall, as well as his promises during and after the 2016 presidential campaign. "To be honest, it's not a wall," Kelly said in an interview with the Los Angeles Times. "The president still says wall, oftentimes frankly he'll say barrier or fencing, now he's tended toward steel slats. But we left a solid concrete wall early on in the administration, when we asked people what they needed and where they needed it." Pelosi, after regaining the speakership this week, made clear that no wall of any kind was on the table. "We're not doing a wall," Pelosi told reporters. "Does anybody have any doubt about that? We are not doing a wall. So that's that. It has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with, the wall is an immorality between countries. It's an old way of thinking and it isn't cost effective." At one point during a meeting at the White House on Wednesday, according to the Wall Street Journal, Pelosi interrupted Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen while she was citing statistics related to the border, including how many criminal illegal immigrants attempted to enter the U.S. last year.